Though we covered constructor in our previous videos, but I think this special method deserves a special individual video. So let's understand a constructor more in depth. What is it, what it does, and why it's important, and how it helps us write clean and powerful code. So let's begin. So what is a constructor? What is a constructor? A constructor is a special method that is automatically called when you create a new object from a class. In Python, the constructor method is named --init --. So let's take a real-life analogy. Imagine you are baking a cake. When you create a new cake, you always mix flour, eggs, sugar first. That's the constructor part. It prepares your cake. Similarly, Python prepares the object when you create it using --init --. Now, why is a constructor useful? It is useful because it allows you to set up your object with data immediately. So every object starts with the right information. Okay? Now, if you create a class, for example, student, and there, if you do not define a constructor, let's see what happens. So let me write a normal method. So def set underscore data, and here we get the self, which refers to the object we work on. And let's have some more parameters, for example, name, then age, and in the function we can say that self dot name equal name, then self dot age equal age. Now you are seeing these squiggly lines. Let's ignore them for this moment. Let's see what happens actually. Now we have this class, and let's create an object with that class. For example, s1 equal student. Okay. Now, as we don't have any constructor, we don't have to give the data or attributes right away. Instead of that, what we can do here is we can write s1 dot set data, this method we created, and here we can give the name, for example, Gojo, and the age is 18. Okay. Now if I write the print statement and pass s1 dot name and run the code, you will see that this works. But you have to manually call set data every time. What if you forgot? Because you are calling this method to set just the data. First of all, you are creating that object, then you have to add another line, call another method to just set the data. But if you use a constructor, for example, if you make this --init --, then this line is showing error because we don't have that set data method now. So let me comment this. Now when you give a constructor, you can't create an object without these parameters. It will throw error. In the previous case, when we didn't define a constructor, we could actually create an object. After creating that object, we set a data. But when we have a constructor, it won't allow me to create an object without the data. So it is a must that you have to give the attributes or the data to create an object. So this becomes stricter. So I have to give there Gojo, then 18. Now if I run the code, you will see everything works fine. So this init means the constructor is a special method, and we don't have to call this manually. It gets called automatically. And in a constructor, which parameters we expect, we must provide them while creating object. Otherwise, it won't allow us to create an object. If I show you that if I remove these and just try to run the code, you will see it throws error. Okay. But if I make this comment and uncomment this line and rename this constructor to set data to make this a normal function, then I have to write s1 equal student, and we are just creating an object without any data. So if I run the code, As you can see, it is not throwing error, but we must have a name and age. We are not providing those data and we are still able to create an object, but that should not be the case. We should get error, because if you somehow forget this line, then try to print s1.name and run the code, you'll see error. So this will cause unintentional errors in your program. So it is a best practice to use a constructor in these cases. So let me go back to the constructor example. Okay, now if I run the code, it works perfectly fine. So again, this is a special method called automatically, and self refers to the current object, and name and age are parameters which data we pass while creating objects. And here, when we write self.name equal name, it saves the data in the object's memory. Now let's discuss about some common questions. For example, what is a constructor? Again, it's a method called automatically when an object is created. Now you can ask, is dash dash init dash dash the only constructor in Python? The answer is yes, it's the default constructor used to initialize data. Then another question is, can we have a class without init? Yes, but then you must set data manually, as like this one. Then the next question is, can dash dash init dash dash have default values? The answer is yes. So let's see an example. For example, let me comment this. Now create another class called person, then def dash dash init, and there we expect parameter like name, but default value, for example, unknown. So if we do not provide a value while creating an object, then we should use unknown as a default name. And let's say we have another parameter called age, and here we can give a default value 0. So while creating an object, if we don't pass the age, it will consider the age as 0. Then we can say self dot name equal name, then self dot age equal age. Now let's create an object called p1 equal person, and as you can see, though we are not passing name and age, it is not showing errors because we have some default values. Even we don't pass any value or attribute, these values will be used as default value. Then everything is same as we have learned earlier. For example, you can define a function called show underscore info, and you can just print self.name is then self.age. Okay, then you can call p1.show info. If you run the code, you'll see it prints unknown is 0. But if you give the parameters, for example, Naruto, then age is 25, and run the code, you'll see it prints Naruto is 25. Now instead of unknown, we use Naruto because we are passing that, and instead of 0, we use 25 because for age we are passing 25. So we don't have to use the default value. Now you can pass a single parameter value as well. So if you just pass the name and run the code, you'll see it uses Naruto in the place of name. So Naruto is, then for age it uses the default value as we are not passing. Okay, but if I remove this and write here 25, it will throw error because we are not following the order. In the constructor, name is at first, so to give the age, first we have to give the name. Okay, so we have to give the name, means a string. Okay, it will work, but as you can see, the age is the second parameter. You just cannot ignore the first parameter and just pass the second parameter. If you try to run, it will become 25 is 0, so it will cause some error. So you have to follow the order. You can just ignore the later attributes. So for example, if you just pass Naruto, it will take the default value for other attributes which come later. If you want to use age, then you must put age first here. Okay, then again you have to follow the order. Now you have to give the age first, then you can give the name. If you run the code, you'll see it works fine. Naruto is 25. Now you can ignore giving name, and if you run the code, you'll see it prints unknown is 25. Okay, so that's all for this video. Before finishing this video, I want to give you an practice assignment. So create a class book, have a constructor that takes title, author, and price, and add a method show details. Okay, and that method will just print all the data, for example title, author, and price. So in our previous practice sessions I have gave all the solutions, but now as you understand classes, objects, constructor in more in depth, that's why I'm not gonna give you the solution of this practice example. I expect you to solve this on your own. So that's all for this video. See you in the next one.